London, 1842. The dress was heavier than it should have been, not because of the French satin, nor the delicate lace her grandmother had sewn by hand, but because, in a matter of minutes, she was expected to say yes to the wrong man. She clutched the bouquet of white lilies too tightly, fingers trembling against the stems. The church was full, every gaze fixed on her, every breath waiting. Except his. Where was he now? In the dim study of the ducal estate, fighting the feelings he refused to name? Or still in Ashford, trying to forget the thing neither of them had ever dared speak aloud? Trying to forget her. The organ began to play. She took her first step. Her future husband stood at the altar, his back turned in solemn tradition. Childhood friend, gentle, dependable, safe. No love, only comfort. And perhaps comfort should have been enough. Second step. She had promised herself she wouldn't look back, promised she would forget the day they met each other's eyes for the first time, the quiet spark, the question asked in the garden at dusk. Are you happy? Third step. The world narrowed until there was nothing but her own heartbeat and the echo of her footsteps. She stopped beside him, just a breath away, and then he turned. But it was not the man she had known all her life, not the kind, steady friend she was meant to marry. It was the Duke, and her heart forgot how to beat. Morning arrived cold, as all November mornings did in the county of Kent. She stood at the bedroom window, still in her nightgown, watching the gardens disappear beneath a veil of fog. The rose bushes her mother once tended were bare now, dark, thorned silhouettes against a white sky. Everything felt suspended, the air, the light, her own heart. Today, she would marry. Today, at 23 years old, she would say yes to a man she had known since childhood. A good man. Kind, loyal. Someone who had never once made her cry, but someone who had never made her feel alive either. She touched the cold glass with the tips of her fingers. Beyond the stone wall that divided their estates, beyond 15 years of distance, stood the ducal residence. He still lived there, alone, distant, exactly as he had always been. She had never known what he thought. Even as children, she could never decipher him. While his brother laughed and ran through the fields, he stayed at the window, quiet, composed, already carrying the weight of a future title. He had been born to become the Duke. And she? She had been born to run wild in the gardens, to laugh too loud, to race barefoot through summer grass, to argue with his brother like they shared the same blood. But never with him. He had always been untouchable. More Duke than boy. More distance than warmth. She exhaled softly and stepped away from the window. Today, all of that was supposed to end. Today, she would marry his brother. The arrangement was made. The families pleased, society approving. Yet, as she placed the veil in her hair, her gaze drifted once more toward that dark, silent window, unaware that in the room beyond it, with a glass of brandy and a heart far heavier than pride allowed, the Duke was thinking of her too. Chapter 1. Lady Oliver Ashfield. 1 month earlier. The wind carried the scent of ripe wheat and damp earth. Catherine rode across the Brennan fields with the ease of someone born in the saddle. Her legs gripped the horse firmly, the men's riding trousers giving her the freedom no dress ever had. Her hair, tied loosely at the nape, streamed behind her like a banner of defiance. She loved mornings like this, far from corsets and stiff smiles. Far from polite conversations about marriage and reputation that her mother insisted upon. Out here, it was just her, the horse, and the open world. Her father was waiting at the northern edge of the property, overseeing the last of the harvest before autumn. She was supposed to meet him in 10 minutes. But first, she needed to breathe. She needed to remember who she was before marriage turned her into someone else entirely. Lady Oliver Ashfield. The name felt wrong, as if it belonged to someone she had not yet become, and might never want to be. She shook the thought away and urged the horse forward. The animal surged into a faster gallop, cutting through the sea of golden wheat. And then, it happened. A rabbit darted out from the brush. The horse reared in panic. Catherine yanked the reins, trying to steady it, but the movement was too sudden. Her body was thrown sideways, and she hit the ground hard, air knocked clean from her lungs. Pain rippled through her shoulder, ribs, hip. She lay still for a moment, staring up at the spinning blue sky. "Damn rabbit," she muttered, struggling to sit up. "Don't move yet." The voice was deep, steady, familiar and unfamiliar all at once. Catherine turned her head and froze. Adrian Ashfield, the Duke. He stood only steps away, dark eyes fixed on her, expression unreadable. He wore simple riding clothes, without the formality he usually carried like armor. His hair, usually immaculate, was tousled by the wind. And for the first time in 15 years, he did not look distant. He looked human. "Your Grace," she said, her voice hoarse. "I'm fine." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer and knelt beside her, gaze sweeping over her with a soldier's precision. "Can you move your arms?" She lifted them. Pain, yes. But movement, yes. "And your legs?" She obeyed again. Everything worked. Adrian nodded once, relieved, and extended his hand. Slowly. Catherine hesitated, not because she doubted him, but because accepting that hand felt like accepting something more. But she placed her hand in his. His fingers were warm, steady. He lifted her with care, holding her just long enough for the world to stop spinning. "Thank you," she said quickly, withdrawing her hand as soon as she could. "The horse ran," he said, glancing toward the field. "Your father will likely catch it." Catherine followed his gaze and winced. "He's going to kill me." For falling? For riding in trousers. Again. For the first time, she caught the ghost of a smile at his lips. Barely there. But real. "I assume this is not the first time." "Nor the 10th, she admitted, brushing dirt from her clothes. "It's simply practical. I truly don't understand how anyone rides side saddle without dying. Most ladies do not gallop as you do." There was something in his tone, not chastisement, curiosity, admiration. She tilted her head. "And is that a compliment or a scolding, Your Grace?" He studied her for a long, quiet moment, as though seeing something he hadn't allowed himself to see before. "A fact," he said finally. Silence. The wind moved between them, carrying the warm scent of sunlit wheat. "What were you doing here?" she asked. "This is Brennan land." "I know. I was walking." "Walking," she repeated, unconvinced. "Thinking?" "Yes." "About what?" Adrian paused, and in that pause, something in him shifted. She saw, just for a moment, the man behind the title. "The weight of choices made for us by others," he said. Catherine's breath caught. She knew that feeling. Too well. "And did you arrive at a conclusion?" He looked at her then, truly looked, not as the future bride of his brother, not as the neighbor he'd known since childhood, but as herself. "Not yet," he said quietly. "And you?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out, because this was the first time she had ever stood before Adrian Ashfield without Oliver between them, without expectations, without walls. Something shifted inside her. "I should go," she said, voice unsteady. "My father will be waiting." Adrian nodded, but he didn't move. "May I walk with you?" She should say no. She should be sensible. But instead, she nodded. and the two of them walked side by side through the wheat fields, in silence. A silence full of meaning neither dared to speak. Chapter 2. The Weight of a Name. Adrian knew he should not be there. There were documents waiting in his study, letters from Parliament demanding his attention, meetings scheduled and postponed more times than his steward dared to count. A ducal estate did not govern itself, and the world did not wait simply because a man needed a moment of air, but he had needed to breathe, away from walls that pressed closer every year, away from duty, away from the quiet, relentless ache of being the Duke of Ravenfield since 19, when grief and responsibility had fallen on him in the same night. Now 28, the weight no longer crushed him, but some days it threatened to. So he walked, across his gardens, through the orchard, past the stone wall that divided his estate from the neighboring lands. He knew precisely whose fields he was stepping into: the Brennan wheat, ripened gold beneath the late summer sun. He knew he should have turned back, but that was the first moment in weeks when his head was quiet, when his breathing was his own. And then he saw her. At first, she was only a moving silhouette in the distance, a rider cutting across the field with reckless speed. He narrowed his eyes. Who would ride like that over uneven ground? Then recognition struck him like a blow. Catherine Brennan. But not the Catherine of dinner parlors and polite remarks. Not the young woman who folded her hands just so, who smiled when spoken to, who wore silk gowns and the expectations of everyone around her. No, this was another Catherine entirely. This Catherine wore riding trousers, a plain shirt, hair undone and ungoverned by society's rules. She was laughing into the wind, or perhaps the wind itself was laughing with her. She rode as if the world had never told her no, as if the rules that confined everyone else simply did not apply to her. Free. Utterly, impossibly free. Adrian stood frozen, caught between admiration and something far more dangerous. There was a wild, unpolished beauty in the sight, one he had spent years avoiding by looking away. And then the moment shattered. The horse reared. Too sudden, too violent. He saw her fall before she even hit the ground. Adrian ran. Not as a duke, not as a gentleman, not as a man thinking at all. He simply ran. By the time he reached her, his heart was pounding, not from the sprint, but from fear. Real fear. The kind that claws through bone. She lay in the wheat, breath uneven, eyes turned to the sky. "Don't move," he said, though his own voice was unsteady. She turned her head toward him, and their eyes met. And for a single suspended second, the sun, the fields, the world, disappeared. "Your Grace," she murmured, trying to rise. "I'm fine." No, she wasn't. She was shaken, and she was pretending. She had always been taught to. He knelt beside her anyway. "Move your arms." She did. Then her legs. Relief, sharper than he expected, washed through him. He offered his hand. He should not have. It crossed a boundary they had both spent years respecting. One neither of them could name aloud, but she took it. Her fingers were warm against his. He lifted her slowly, carefully, too carefully. And when she pulled her hand away, too fast, the absence felt like pain. "The horse ran," he said, forcing his voice back into something cool and reasonable. "Your father will find it." She exhaled in resignation. "He'll scold me." "For falling?" "For wearing trousers. Again." She brushed grass from her clothes. "He says I should have been born a son, or at least behave like one." Adrian almost smiled. Silence settled between them, and in that silence, something shifted. Something subtle. Something neither could name. "I should return," she said, though she did not move. "May I walk with you?" The words escaped before he could stop them. She looked at him, truly looked, and for a moment, he thought she might refuse. but she didn't. "If you insist, Your Grace." They walked. The wheat whispered around them. Catherine broke the silence first. "You don't usually walk this far." "No," he admitted, "but today I needed distance." "From what?" The question was simple, real, unadorned. No one ever asked him questions like that. "From responsibility," he answered. She stopped walking. Her gaze met his, steady, understanding. "I know something about that," she said softly. "More than you think." He believed her. "You marry in a month," he said, not as a question. Her expression tightened. "Yes." "To Oliver." "Yes." "He's a good man," Adrian said, the words pressing like stone against his ribs. "I know." "He will treat you well." She did not respond immediately. When she did, her voice was calm. Too calm. "Happiness is not what this marriage is meant to provide, Your Grace. Stability is. Respect. A proper arrangement." "And that is enough for you?" The question came out sharper than he intended. She turned her gaze forward again, toward the Brennan Manor. "It must be," she said. "Just as bearing a title was enough for you at 19, we do not choose everything we become." She was right, and the truth of it unsettled him. They walked in silence again, until the house came into view. "May I ask you something?" she said suddenly. "Yes?" "Have you ever wished to be someone else? Not a duke, just Adrian." The question landed like a blade, clean, quiet, precise. No one had ever asked him that. No one had ever even considered he might be more than his title. "Every day," he said, voice low. Catherine nodded, not in surprise, but in recognition. "I sometimes wonder who I would be if I were not the daughter expected to marry correctly," she said. "If I were not a promise made on my behalf before I could speak for myself." He stopped walking. So did she. "Who would you be?" he asked. She smiled, a soft, broken smile. "Someone free." Something inside him, something he had locked away years ago, broke open. Hope. Want. Dangerous things. They reached the gates of her home. "Thank you for walking with me, Your Grace," she said. "Adrian?" he corrected, quietly, urgently. "My name is Adrian." She blinked. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Then you may call me Catherine." She turned and walked toward the house. Adrian stood where she left him, the wheat bending around his boots, the wind cool against his face. And as he finally turned back toward his own estate, he let himself commit the most dangerous act of his life. He imagined a world in which they belonged to no one but themselves. Chapter 3. The question that should not have been asked. 3 days. It had been only 3 days since the fall, and Catherine still could not get him out of her mind. She had tried. God, she had tried. She threw herself into the workings of the house, helped her mother arrange flowers for the parlor, rode out with her father to inspect the fields. She even embroidered, which she despised, simply to keep her hands occupied. But at night, when the lamps were extinguished and the world grew quiet, her mind betrayed her. She saw him, Adrian Ashfield, kneeling beside her in the wheat, his hand wrapped around hers, his voice low and rough, asking, "Are you hurt?" Catherine rolled over in the sheets, pressing her face into the pillow as if she could smother the memory. Ridiculous. Absurd. Dangerous. She was promised to Oliver. Oliver, who had always been gentle, who laughed with her, who never tried to change her. Oliver, who never made her heart race. She rose from the bed and crossed to the window. From her room, she could just make out the ducal estate on the neighboring hill. The house was dark, except for a single window on the second floor. The study. He was awake too. The realization hit her like a held breath finally released. She was not alone in her restlessness. Not anymore. The next morning, her mother burst into her room with an excitement that seemed out of place in the quiet of early winter. "Catherine, darling, I have the most marvelous news." Catherine did not look up from the book she was pretending to read. "I invited the Ashfields to dinner. Tomorrow evening." The book nearly slipped from her hands. "What?" "The Ashfields, dear. Oliver, the Duke, and Lady Charlotte. I thought it would be lovely to bring the families together before the wedding. It is only a month away after all. We must strengthen the bond." Catherine's pulse quickened, too fast, too sharp. "Mother, don't you think that is rather soon?" "Soon?" Her mother laughed pleasantly. "You'll all be family soon enough, and besides, His Grace rarely accepts social invitations. It is an honor he'd agreed." Honor. Yes, and a torment. Catherine hardly heard anything else her mother said after that. Her only coherent thought was, "I will see him again." And she could not tell whether that thought terrified her or saved her. The next day passed much too quickly. Her maid, Mary, young, hopeful, eager, braided Catherine's hair into an elegant style and fastened her into a dark green gown chosen by her mother. When Catherine finally looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself, not the girl in trousers racing through the wind. No, this was the woman the world expected her to be, composed, controlled, contained. "You look beautiful," Mary said softly. Catherine smiled back, but the smile did not reach her heart. They arrived precisely at 7. Catherine heard their voices in the hall before she saw them. Her pulse stuttered. Lady Charlotte entered first, dignified, warm-eyed. Oliver followed, all friendly ease and familiar comfort. And then, Adrian. He entered the room as though the walls parted for him, calm, controlled, untouchable. Catherine's breath caught. Oliver greeted her with affectionate familiarity. "You look radiant," he laughed. She smiled. She had practiced that smile. It cost her nothing and meant nothing. But when Adrian stepped forward, "Lady Catherine," he said, formal, neutral, safe. He took her hand and brushed his lips against it, the polite greeting of the nobility. Yet the moment their skin touched, something sparked. Not a flame. A recognition. Her pulse stumbled. "Your Grace," she managed, though her voice came out thinner than intended. He released her hand at once, but she had seen it, the tightness in his jaw, the way his hand closed into a fist at his side. He had felt it too. Dinner was agony. She sat across from him, every stolen glance a silent confession neither of them would ever say aloud. Oliver spoke cheerfully. Her father debated politics with the Duke. The candles flickered, the wine poured. But the only thing real in the room was the distance between two people who should never have noticed one another. "Catherine, dear," her mother said suddenly, "you haven't touched your dinner." Catherine blinked back into the world. All eyes were on her. "I am quite well," she said with practiced grace. "Merely thinking." Oliver laughed lightly, probably planning how to escape the ceremony. She always did hate being told what to do. A joke. Everyone smiled, except Adrian. His expression did not move, but something in his eyes did, something that looked like pain. After dinner, the men withdrew to the study for brandy. Catherine remained behind with her mother until she could no longer bear it. "I'll step out for some air," she said softly. Her mother only nodded. Catherine slipped out into the garden. The night air was cold, but it felt like freedom. What is happening to me? She should be thinking of Oliver. She should be preparing to be a wife. She should be grateful. But her heart had begun to disobey. Footsteps. She turned. Adrian stood a short distance away, the shadows framing him in quiet restraint. "You couldn't stay inside either," he said. His voice was quiet, tired, real. Catherine swallowed. No, she whispered. I could not. They stood there, careful, fragile, suspended, one breath too close to ruin. Finally, Adrian spoke, his voice barely audible. Are you happy, Lady Catherine? The question was a blade. She could not lie, not with her voice. But she could not speak the truth either, so she said nothing. And in her silence, he understood. Something inside him broke. I should not have asked, he said, stepping back, voice raw. Forgive me. Adrian. But he had already turned away. He disappeared into the dark, leaving Catherine alone in the garden, heart racing, hands trembling, breath unsteady, knowing that the world had just shifted, and nothing would ever return to how it was. Chapter 4. What Hope Does to a Man. Adrian barely remembered the ride home. The carriage was hushed. Oliver chatted, cheerful and oblivious, recounting bits of the evening. Charlotte sat across from them with that maternal gaze that always saw too much. Adrian heard none of it. All he could hear was his own voice echoing in his skull. Are you happy? Oliver. And her answer, that was not an answer at all. The silence that said everything. She was not happy. And he had done the worst possible thing. He had made her admit it. To herself. To him. Adrian, are you unwell? Charlotte asked softly. I am, he lied, eyes fixed on the black window. He was not. He was coming apart. When they reached the house, Adrian dismissed everyone and locked himself in the study. He poured brandy, drank, poured again, drank. The burn did nothing to cauterize what the garden had opened in him, or what he had felt when he helped her to her feet in the wheat, the way she looked at him, the nakedness in her eyes, the truth she could not hide. She did not love Oliver, and God forgive him, that truth filled him with hope. Hope, the most dangerous thing a man in his position could feel. What could he possibly do with it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Oliver was his brother, his only living kin after their father died. The boy Adrian had raised, protected, guided. And Catherine was Oliver's fiancée. The families had agreed. Invitations were sent. The date was set. There was no turning back. He filled the glass again, his hand shaking. But what if there were? The thought slithered in, treacherous. What if you told the truth? What if you spoke to Oliver? What if— No, he said aloud, as if saying it could make it so. No, he could not. It did not matter what he felt. It did not matter what she felt. Even if whatever this was had rooted in his chest like a weed, stronger by the day, strangling reason. Why now, when he had known her for years? He pressed his forehead to his hands and tried to make sense of it. From a distance he had always seen her, laughing, unafraid of censure, as though only joy mattered. Catherine running the gardens, arguing with Oliver like a sister, defying convention with a freedom he had never possessed. So what had changed? Learning she wore trousers? He had suspected as much. Catherine was never a conventional lady. Watching her gallop as if the world belonged to her? Perhaps. But not only that. It was the vulnerability he had seen when she fell. The way she looked at him, not as the untouchable Duke, but as Adrian. Only Adrian. It was the brutal honesty in her eyes when he asked if she was happy. The absence of masks between them. It was realizing that, for 15 years, he had watched a girl become a remarkable woman, and that something in him, buried under duty and decorum, had always known she was special. Not for Oliver. For him. Nothing about her had changed. He had finally allowed himself to see. And now that he knew, how was he to pretend otherwise? How was he to stand in a church and watch her pledge her life to another man, knowing a single word from him might alter everything? He poured more brandy, the glass knocking softly against the decanter, because that one word would destroy everything. Oliver, the family, everyone's expectations, and perhaps she would be happier never knowing she had a choice. The days that followed were a quiet hell. Adrian drowned himself in work, papers, meetings, letters from Parliament, anything to keep from thinking. But at night, when the house fell silent, it all returned. Her face, her voice, the tremor in her fingers when they touched. "What kind of happiness do you mean, Your Grace?" "Oliver." He despised himself for asking. He despised himself more for the answer he had won. Because now he knew, and not knowing would have been easier. A week after the dinner, Charlotte entered his study without knocking. "Adrian, we need to talk." He lifted his eyes, exhausted. "About what?" "About you," she said, closing the door and taking the chair opposite his desk. "What is happening to you?" "I'm working, Mother." "You're hiding," she corrected gently. "You've been bowed and silent for a week. I want to know why." He looked away. "I don't know what you mean." "Liar," Charlotte said without heat. "I am your mother. I have known you since you drew breath. I know when something is eating you alive." Silence. She sighed. "Does it concern Lady Catherine?" Adrian went still. "I noticed," she said quietly. "At dinner. The way you looked at her. The way she looked at you." "Mother?" "And that you slipped into the garden. So did she. When you returned, you both seemed altered. Is there something between you?" He closed his eyes, a tightness in his chest. "There is nothing I can do," he said hoarsely. "She marries Oliver in 3 weeks. Does she love Oliver?" The question landed like a blow. "No," he confessed. "She does not." "And Oliver? Does he love her?" Adrian hesitated, then shook his head. "They are friends. He cares for her deeply. He would do anything for her. But love? Not the kind that matters." Charlotte was quiet for a long moment. "Then why?" she asked at last. "Are you allowing this to happen?" "Because it is right," Adrian burst out, standing too fast. "Because the families agreed. Because Oliver expects it. Because I cannot simply burn the world down for selfish feeling." "Selfish?" Charlotte repeated, incredulous. "Adrian, you have spent your entire life placing duty above all else. You have bled for that title, for this family, for expectation. When was the last time you allowed yourself to want anything for yourself?" "It doesn't matter." "It does." She rose and came to him. "You are not only the Duke. You are a man. You deserve to be happy." "And Oliver? Does he not?" "Oliver deserves to marry someone who loves him," she said, steady as a benediction. "Not someone forcing herself out of obligation. That is not fair to either of them." He turned away, hands braced on the desk, head bowed. "I can't, Mother. How am I to tell him?" Charlotte set her hand on his shoulder. "Then you must remove yourself. Completely. Because if you remain as you are, you will destroy everyone, yourself included." Adrian shut his eyes. She was right. And that was exactly what he would do. 2 days later, Adrian left. He did not say goodbye to Catherine. He sent no note, no explanation. He told Oliver only that urgent matters required his attention at a distant estate, and that he would return in time for the ceremony. Oliver did not question it. He was too occupied with last preparations. And Adrian fled. Because it was the only thing he could do that did not set the world ablaze. Chapter 5. The Quiet Drowning. 2 weeks. Only 2 weeks remained until the wedding, and Catherine felt as though she were slowly sinking beneath the surface of her own life. The house was a whirlwind of preparations, servants carrying ribbons and china, seamstresses arriving with new lace, her mother gliding through the halls like a queen presiding over a celebration she had waited years to orchestrate. Everyone seemed pleased. Everyone moved with purpose and delight. Everyone, except her. Catherine played her part. She smiled when spoken to, nodded when asked for her opinion, allowed herself to be fitted, cinched, polished, arranged. Her mother adored how calm she appeared, how poised, how graceful. But every night, when she closed her bedroom door, the facade crumbled, and what remained was a single question echoing in her chest. "Are you happy?" Adrian's voice, quiet, steady, too honest. She had not answered. She had not needed to. Her silence had answered for her. No. She was not happy, and she didn't know how to continue pretending that she was. Oliver visited often, 4 times that week alone. He was gentle, familiar, kind. He spoke of their future with warm certainty, the house near the coast, the garden where she could plant whatever she liked, long walks in the evening. He described a quiet, comfortable life, the kind of life most women would pray for. Catherine wished she could be one of them. But when he took her hand, she felt nothing. No spark, no warmth blooming up her arm, no flutter in her chest, just emptiness. A soft, quiet emptiness that frightened her more than any storm would have. One afternoon, as they walked through the garden, Oliver laughed lightly and said, "You've seemed distant, Pepper." He still used the nickname he'd given her when she was 9. "You're not having second thoughts, are you?" Second thoughts, third thoughts, 100 thoughts, all of them tearing her apart. But Catherine forced a gentle smile and said, "Everyone gets nervous before a wedding, don't they?" Oliver relaxed instantly, so easily comforted, so trusting, and that was the moment it struck her. He loves her as one loves a childhood friend, warmly, kindly, but not fiercely, not deeply, not the way she now knew love could feel. They walked a little longer before Oliver added casually, "Oh, Adrian left 2 days ago. Traveled to Ashford. He won't be back until the ceremony." Catherine stopped walking. "He left?" Her voice came out thinner than she meant. "Of course." Oliver laughed. "You know how he is. He hates all this wedding fuss. He always escapes when things get too busy." Escaped. That word landed like a blade. He left to avoid her. Left so the silence would settle. Left so she would move forward. Left so whatever had sparked between them could die quietly, without witnesses. She managed a nod and let Oliver lead her back inside, her face calm, her steps steady. But inside, her heart was breaking. That night, when she was finally alone, she dissolved into quiet, shaking sobs, the kind that came from someplace deep and raw. She pressed her hands to her face to muffle the sound, but her body shook anyway, grief spilling out of her like water through broken glass. She had not lost him. She had lost the possibility of choosing something real. What could have been? What almost was? What would never be? A week before the wedding, her mother found her sitting alone in the garden, staring at nothing. "Catherine," Lady Brennan said softly, sitting beside her, "you haven't been eating. I'm worried." Catherine kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, on the neighboring estate she could no longer look at without pain. "He's not there," she thought. "He won't be there again until it is too late." "Mama," Catherine whispered, voice thin. "What if I'm not ready?" Lady Brennan's expression softened, not with surprise, but with the sad recognition of a truth she had once lived herself. "No woman ever feels ready," her mother said quietly. "Marriage is a step we enter with hope and patience. You are lucky. Oliver is a good man. He will not demand more than you can give." "Is that enough?" Catherine asked, tears finally gathering. Her mother's answer was gentle, but devastating. "Most of us learn to live with what is enough, my love. With time, affection grows. Stability can be its own kind of peace." Stability. Safety. A life that would look beautiful and feel empty. Catherine closed her eyes. she understood now what she would be choosing. Not Oliver, not marriage, not duty, but resignation. In 3 days, she would walk down an aisle. In 3 days, she would speak vows she did not feel. In 3 days, she would step into a life that was not hers. And for the rest of her days, she would carry the memory of the moment her heart could have chosen differently. But didn't. Chapter 6. The Decision. Ashford House, his estate in Hampshire, was exactly what Adrian needed. Silence, distance, emptiness. The manor stood a full day's travel from London, surrounded by rolling green hills and miles of untouched fields. There were no balls here, no dinners, no families watching his every move, no title waiting to be performed. Only the quiet staff who did not ask questions, and the storm he carried inside himself. The first days passed almost bearably. He buried himself in work, inspected the harvest, reviewed ledgers, spoke with the land steward, rode until his muscles burned and his lungs ached. Anything to avoid thinking. But when night came and the house fell silent, the truth rushed back like a tide breaking loose. Her face, her voice. The moment in the garden when everything he had buried finally surfaced. Oliver. Just her saying the name had shattered him, not because she said it, but because of how she tried not to break while saying it. He poured another drink, the glass shaking just slightly in his hand. He had run, like a coward. But how else was he meant to survive? Watch her walk down an aisle toward another man? Stand beside Oliver during the ceremony, his brother, the only family he had left, and pretend nothing inside him was tearing apart? No. Leaving was the only thing he had been capable of. But the rain came. Relentless, heavy, endless rain that turned the fields to shallow lakes and made the roads impossible to travel. The sky stayed gray and the house dim, as though the entire world had agreed to mourn beside him. Trapped indoors, he could no longer outrun his mind. Catherine? Was she choosing her wedding gown now? Rehearsing vows she did not believe? Smiling beside Oliver while her heart remained elsewhere? Or was she, like him, breaking quietly where no one could see? He pressed his hand against the wall, knuckles white with the force of it. This should not have happened. All his life, he had done what was right, what was expected, what preserved order and honor and name. And for the first time, duty felt like a cage. 10 days after his arrival, a letter came. He recognized the handwriting immediately. Oliver. His stomach tightened as he unfolded it. Adrian, I hope Ashford has been peaceful. The wedding is in 4 days. Mother is worried about you. I have been trying to speak with Catherine, but she seems distant. I keep telling myself it is normal, but I can't help wondering whether something is wrong. You know her better than anyone. Do you think she truly wants this? Perhaps I am just nervous. See you soon. Oliver. He read the letter again, and again, and again. Do you think she truly wants this? No. Do you? The thought struck like lightning. He sank into the chair, the paper crumpling under his grip. Everything was a lie. A lie everyone was upholding because it was easier, because changing course now would invite scandal, uncomfortable conversations, disappointment. But the deeper truth was a quieter, more brutal one. Everyone was about to be unhappy. Oliver, Catherine, him. Unless someone spoke, unless someone broke the script. A thought rose inside him, hesitant, trembling, but undeniable. What if I go back? What if I tell the truth? What if I give her the choice she has never been allowed to make? His mind protested instantly. No, that would destroy everything, the family, the alliance, the order of their lives. But then another voice, softer, steady, painfully honest, answered, and doing nothing will also destroy everything. 2 mornings before the wedding, he woke before dawn. The decision was already made. He called for the servant. "Prepare the carriage. We leave for Kent immediately." "But your grace, the rain—" "Now." The servant bowed and hurried away. Adrian packed with no care for arrangement, only for speed. His pulse hammered with something like fear and something like hope, both too sharp to separate. What would he say to Oliver? What would he say to her? He didn't know. He didn't have to know. He only had to show up. The journey was agonizing. The roads were slick, forcing the horses to slow. Every mile felt like a lifetime. He didn't sleep, didn't eat, just stared out at the wet countryside passing by, his jaw tight. He rehearsed words. "Catherine, No. Too fragile. Don't marry him. Too selfish. Perhaps the truth should be simple. You deserve to be happy. And if there is even a chance, the smallest chance, that I might be the man who can make you happy, then I must try. Or maybe. The truth was only 3 words. Words he had never spoken to anyone. I love you. 3 words that could save them, or ruin them all. By the time the carriage rolled into Kent, the sky was deep and dark, the hour late. Lanterns glowed faintly from the Brennan estate across the field, like stars flickering behind fog. Tomorrow was the eve of the wedding. The day after, she would walk toward a life she did not choose. Adrian gripped the edge of the window frame. There is no turning back now. Either he spoke, or he would lose her forever. He exhaled, long, slow, steady, as though preparing for battle. For the first time in his life, he would not let fear decide for him. Not when it came to her. Chapter 7. The Eve. Morning arrived gray, as if even the sky understood that something was wrong. Catherine woke before dawn, her eyes swollen from too little sleep. Today was the eve of the wedding. Tomorrow, she would stand before the altar and promise her life to Oliver. Tomorrow, everything would be sealed. She rose slowly, her limbs heavy and uncooperative. From outside came the sound of footsteps, voices, hurried movement, maids rushing through corridors, boxes being carried, carriages prepared for the journey to London. Everyone was excited, everyone except her. She crossed the room and opened the curtains. The Ashfield estate lay silent beyond the fields, dark and empty. Adrian had not returned. Oliver had said he would arrive only on the morning of the ceremony, walk straight into the church and take his place beside them. He really means to avoid me until the final moment, she thought, a tightness forming in her chest. Perhaps that was best. Seeing him now, feeling everything she was forcing herself to quiet, would be unbearable. And yet, a small, painful part of her hoped. Hoped he would come. Hoped he would appear at her door and say the words she had been too afraid to speak herself. Stop. She pressed her palms to her eyes. Fantasies did not change reality. In 24 hours, she would be Lady Oliver Ashfield. Everything else, everything foolish, impossible, burning, would have to disappear. She tried to imagine her future. A home. Meals eaten peacefully. Children, maybe. A quiet life, steady and polite. Oliver would never scold her for riding in trousers. He would never raise his voice. He would never ask her to be someone she was not. But there would be no fire, no breathless laughter, no racing heart, no sense of living instead of simply existing. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Her mother entered, glowing, carrying a tray of tea and toast. "Good morning, my beautiful bride," Lady Brennan chimed, setting the tray down. "Today is the final fitting, and the confirmation of the musicians, and we must rethink the flower arrangements for the entrance. Such a marvelous whirlwind." Catherine forced a smile. "Yes, Mamma." "You must eat something." "Mary will be here soon to begin your hair. We should test the veil once more." Catherine nodded, letting herself be guided through the endless preparations as though her body were moved by someone else's hands. Dresses, ribbons, pins, smiles, nods, agreements. Everything perfect, everything correct, everything wrong. In the afternoon, while Mary adjusted the veil yet again, Catherine felt something buckle inside her. "Mary, would you please leave us for a moment?" The girl curtsied and slipped out. Lady Brennan's expression changed instantly, joy replaced by concern. "What is it, my darling?" Catherine exhaled a breath she had been holding for weeks. "Mama, I can't do this." The silence that followed was heavy enough to break. "What do you mean?" her mother asked softly. "I can't marry Oliver." The words tumbled out now, unstoppable. "Not like this. Not when my heart is somewhere else." Her mother's expression did not collapse into shock or anger, only understanding so deep it hurt to see. "In another place," she said quietly. "Or with another person." Catherine's eyes filled. "It doesn't matter. It's too late. The invitations, the church, the families." "Catherine," Lady Brennan said, taking her hands, "look at me." She did. "If you truly cannot do this, then you must not. A marriage without love is a cage that only tightens. But the scandals fade. A lifetime does not." Catherine shook her head, tears falling. "Oliver is my friend. He deserves kindness. He deserves someone who loves him with her whole heart. I can't humiliate him. I can't ruin his name for the sake of—" Her voice broke. "For the sake of my cowardice." "This is not cowardice." But Catherine only shook her head. "If I wanted to be brave, I should have spoken sooner. Now it is too late." She stood and crossed the room, looking again out the window toward the empty fields. "I will marry Oliver tomorrow. I will be the wife he deserves, and I will learn to be content." But even as she spoke, she knew it was a lie. Because somewhere inside her, past reason, past pride, a small flickering flame refused to die. A part of her still hoped, still waited, still dreamed of a door opening, a voice calling her name, a hand reaching for hers. But dreams belong to fairy tales. And in life, people did what was expected of them, even when it shattered them. Night fell early. Dinner passed in laughter and excitement, everyone glowing with anticipation. Her father's eyes were warm and proud. Oliver spoke of their future the way one speaks of something lovely and safe. She smiled when expected, laughed when expected, listened when expected. And when Oliver squeezed her hand and whispered, "Tomorrow, my dearest," she almost broke. Tomorrow. Later, alone, she undressed and folded her gown with steady hands. Tomorrow night, she would no longer be herself. She sat on the bed, pulling her knees to her chest, and allowed herself, just once, to remember him, the way he looked at her that morning in the fields. The question in the garden, the quiet devastation of her answer. "Are you happy, Oliver?" "No," she thought. "No, I am not." But it no longer matters. The tears came, silent, shaking. Tears for the life she would never have, for the choice she had never been given, for the truth she had been too afraid to speak. And when she finally slept, it was with the memory of dark eyes, a steady voice, and the question that would haunt her forever. In the dream, she answered differently. In the dream, she told the truth. Chapter 8. The Wedding Morning. The sun had barely risen when Adrian opened his eyes. In truth, he had not slept at all. He had spent the night pacing the length of his room in Ashford House, rehearsing words that dissolved the moment he whispered them aloud. The journey back to Kent had taken longer than expected. The rain-soaked roads had slowed the horses and forced stops along the way. He had arrived late in the night, when the household was asleep. Too late for explanations. Too late for confessions. But now morning was here, and today would decide everything. Adrian descended the staircase 2 steps at a time, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He needed to prepare. He needed to think. He needed... Adrian. The voice stopped him cold. His mother stood in the doorway of the sitting room. She was already dressed for the journey to London, but her expression held something grave, something final. "Mother," he said cautiously. We need to speak," she interrupted. "Now." Something in the tone left no room for refusal. He followed her into the room. Oliver was there, still in his nightcoat, pale, hands clasped tightly in front of him. Adrian froze. "Oliver, shouldn't you be—" "I know," Oliver said quietly. "Mother told me." The world stilled. "Told you? What?" Oliver stood. His voice did not tremble. "About you. And Catherine." Adrian stopped breathing. He swallowed hard. Oliver, I swear to you, I never intended—" "I know," Oliver said. "I know you would never betray me. You've carried this family on your back for years. You were a father to me when we lost ours. You have never been anything but honorable." His voice softened, and that only made it worse. "But that is exactly why I cannot go through with this wedding." Silence crashed through the room like a storm. "What?" Adrian whispered. Oliver drew a steady breath. "I cannot marry a woman who is in love with someone else, and I cannot marry a woman I do not love the way a husband should." Adrian stared at him, unable to move, unable to speak. Charlotte stepped forward. "Your brother deserves happiness, Adrian. So does Catherine. So do you." Adrian shook his head numbly. "This wedding has been arranged for years. The families will recover from the inconvenience," Charlotte said firmly. "What they won't recover from is watching 3 lives waste away in polite misery." Oliver took a few steps toward the window, then turned back. "Catherine is my dearest friend, my sister in everything but name. I would bleed for her, but I do not love her as a husband ought. I thought, once, that affection and companionship would be enough. But now I see what love looks like." He looked directly at his brother. "I saw it in the garden, when you looked at her, and when she looked back." Adrian felt his knees weaken. He sat heavily in a chair, pressing a hand to his forehead. "This is madness," he whispered. "The ceremony is today. The guests are already gathering. Catherine, she's preparing right now." "I know," Oliver said softly, "which is why we cannot wait." Adrian lifted his head. "Oliver, what are you saying?" Oliver's voice was gentle but unwavering. "I am releasing her, and I am giving her to you." Adrian closed his eyes. The pain, the relief, the terror. "Do you love her?" Oliver asked. Adrian's answer broke free before he could stop it. "Yes." The word tore out of him, raw and unguarded. Oliver nodded. "Then go." Charlotte placed her hand over Adrian's. "Your entire life has been duty, sacrifice, and silence," she whispered. "For once, let your heart speak." 2 hours later, at the Brennan estate, Catherine sat before her mirror. The bride in the reflection looked faultlessly composed. The gown of ivory silk, the veil edged with her grandmother's lace, the jewels passed down through generations. But her eyes were wrong. They were empty. Mary stepped back, smiling. "You look beautiful, milady." She murmured a thank you. It didn't feel like her voice. Then came the knock. Her mother entered, accompanied by Lady Charlotte Ashfield. Both women were already trembling with emotion. "Oh, my darling," her mother whispered. "You look perfect." Charlotte stepped closer, and though her face was warm, her eyes held secrets. "Truly," she said softly, "radiant." Something in her tone made Catherine's heart twist. "How is Oliver?" she asked carefully. A glance passed between the women. "He is preparing," Charlotte replied, but the words carried weight Catherine could not yet name. "It's time," her mother said gently. "Your father is waiting to escort you." Catherine rose. Her legs wobbled. Her hands were cold. She walked through the house as though in a dream. Her father met her at the carriage door. His eyes shone. "My little girl," he whispered. "Are you ready?" No, but she nodded. The drive to St. George's Hanover Square blurred into nothing. By the time they arrived, the church was full. Nobility, curious onlookers, society journalists, all waiting to witness the grand union. The doors opened. The organ began. And Catherine began to walk. One step, then another. Her father released her arm. She reached the front. The groom stood with his back turned. Her heart pounded. He turned. It was not Oliver. It was Adrian. Time stopped. He looked at her the way a man looks at the one thing that makes breathing worth the effort. Her knees nearly gave way. "Father," she whispered. Her father squeezed her hand. "Sometimes," he murmured, voice thick, "we are given one chance to choose rightly." Then another voice rose. Calm, clear, steady. "Oliver." He stepped into the aisle. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "there will be no wedding today." Gasps rippled through the church. "But there will be something far better. There will be honesty." He turned to Catherine. "You deserve a love that sets your heart on fire. I will not stand in its way." Then to Adrian. "My brother, for once, choose happiness." He stepped aside, and Adrian came down the steps of the altar. Slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving hers. When he stopped in front of her, silence filled the church like a held breath. "You asked me once," he said softly, "what kind of happiness I meant." He reached for her hand. "This kind." His voice trembled, but did not break. "To wake with the one you love, to choose each other, again and again. To be seen and to be known completely." His next words were the truest of his life. "Catherine Ann Brennan, will you marry me? Not out of duty, not out of expectation, but because you love me, because I love you." Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling, and for the first time in months, the smile was real. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I choose you." Their hands joined, and the world finally made sense. Epilogue, 1 year later. The Ashfield House Library glowed with the golden warmth of the late afternoon sun. Dust motes drifted lazily through the amber light, and the crackling fire filled the room with a quiet sense of peace. Adrian sat in his favorite leather armchair, a stack of correspondence open on his lap, though he had not turned a page in several minutes. His thoughts wandered, backward, forward, everywhere but the ink in front of him. Soft footsteps approached. A familiar presence leaned over him, arms slipping around his shoulders. "Working again?" Catherine murmured against his ear, her lips brushing the line of his jaw. "Always," he said, smiling as he pulled her gently onto his lap. "But nothing that cannot wait for my wife." My wife. Even after a full year, the word struck him with quiet wonder. Some mornings, he still woke and needed a breath to remember that she was truly there, warm beside him, real, his. The memory of their wedding still felt dreamlike. It had been chaotic, breathtaking, miraculous. Half the congregation scandalized, a quarter openly weeping, the remaining simply stunned into silence until the applause began. The Archbishop had hesitated, of course, until Charlotte, with the poise of a queen and the conviction of a mother protecting her sons, persuaded him that love was the most sacred of all vows. And so the ceremony had proceeded. Same church, same day, same bride. Just not the same Groom. Catherine traced gentle lines along Adrian's hair, watching him as he watched her. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "That we almost lost this," he replied, lifting her hand to his lips. "All of it, because of pride and fear." "But we didn't lose it," she murmured, "because Oliver didn't let us." Oliver. Gentle, loyal, steady Oliver. The quiet architect of their happiness. After the wedding, he had become the darling of London society, every ambitious mother offering him a daughter with a practiced smile and a flutter of eyelashes. But Oliver had simply laughed, bowed politely, and left England to travel, to write, to breathe freely for the first time in his life. "He sent a letter," Adrian said. "He's in Rome now. He plans to spend Christmas here." Catherine's fingers stilled in his hair for a breath. "Good," she said, voice light. "He should be here to meet his nephew." Adrian blinked. "His nephew?" Catherine's smile bloomed, soft, radiant, luminous in the golden light. "Our son," she said simply. Silence. Then the world burst open. You're certain?" he stammered, already half laughing, half sobbing. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday," she said, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. But this time, they were tears of joy. 3 months. "He'll arrive in the spring." Adrian stood so quickly that Catherine gave a surprised laugh as he lifted her, still seated in his arms, and spun her in a wide, dizzying circle. "We're going to have a child," he cried, laughter bright and unrestrained. "Catherine, my love, we are going to have a child." She laughed with him, hands cupping his face, grounding him even as he felt weightless. "Yes," she whispered, "we are." He set her gently back on her feet, though neither of them let go. "I love you," he said, the words simple, reverent, steady. "More than I ever believed a man could love anything." "And I love you," she breathed. "Always, and always, and always." Their foreheads touched. The fire glowed. The house seemed to hold its breath around them. And as they kissed in the golden quiet of the library, Catherine thought of the girl she had been 1 year before. A girl prepared to accept a life without joy, without passion, without the freedom to choose her own happiness. She had resigned herself to a life that was safe. Instead, she had found a life that was full. Full of love. Full of laughter. Full of hope. Full of him. Sometimes, she realized, miracles did happen. Especially when you are brave enough to reach for them.